Sign it, Sisi, my father said, tapping the pen against the dining room table. My mother slid the lease renewal toward me like she was closing a deal with a stranger. I looked at the number and felt my throat tighten. $2,400 a month. For the basement, I asked. For a roof, my mother corrected. For stability, for fair market rent. I was 29 years old, sitting in the house I had grown up in, being reminded that adulthood was expensive by the same people who still asked me to clean their upstairs bathroom, pick up groceries, and drive my younger brother when they were too busy. Dad leaned back in his chair. Adults don't get handouts. Mom added, honestly, if you had made better choices by now, you'd already have your own place. I signed because I thought I knew the truth. I thought their mortgage was still crushing them. For 8 years they had told me the same thing. The house cost money, taxes were brutal, interest rates were unfair, letting me live downstairs was still cheaper than surviving out there alone. So every month I transferred $2,400. No missed payments, no excuses. They called it rent, I called it helping family survive. That evening, I carried 2 grocery bags around the side of the house toward the basement entrance. Mr. Alvarez, our next-door neighbor, was dragging his trash cans to the curb. He smiled and said, "You must be the most reliable tenant in the neighborhood." I gave a tired laugh. At least it helps them with the mortgage. His smile faded. He looked toward my parents' house, then back at me. "Mortgage," he said. "Sissy, they paid off that house years ago." The plastic grocery bag dug into my fingers. I didn't ask him to repeat it. I didn't defend them. I didn't even blink for a second. I just went downstairs, locked my basement door, and opened my banking app. I searched my parents' names. The payments filled the screen. $2,400. $2,400. $2,400. 8 years of them. My hands were cold by the time I reached the oldest payment. But that one didn't say rent. The memo line said, "Trust transfer reimbursement." And I stared at it, wondering why my first rent payment had anything to do with a trust. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed in the basement, the room lit only by my laptop screen, staring at those 3 words. Trust transfer reimbursement. Not rent. Not basement payment. Not family contribution. Trust. I whispered it once just to hear how strange it sounded in my own room. Trust. My parents had never mentioned a trust, not when I turned 21, not when Grandma died, not when I started paying them, not once in 8 years of telling me money was tight and I needed to pull my weight. The next morning I went upstairs before work. Mom was measuring coffee into the machine. Dad was sitting at the table with his tablet, scrolling through the news like nothing in the world had shifted overnight. I stood by the counter and said, "When did you pay off the mortgage?" Dad's finger stopped moving on the screen. Mom didn't look at me. "Why are you asking that?" "I'm just trying to understand what my rent is covering." "It covers living here," Dad said. "But when was the mortgage paid off?" Mom snapped the coffee lid shut. "That's none of your concern." I kept my voice even. "I've paid almost $230,000 over the years. I think basic transparency is fair." Dad finally looked up. His face had changed, not angry exactly, tighter, like I had touched something I was never supposed to find. "You lived here voluntarily," he said. Mom turned around with her coffee mug in her hand. "And you should be grateful we didn't charge you more." There it was. I wasn't a tenant when I asked for receipts. I wasn't family when they wanted money. I was whatever helped them win the conversation. I said, "Why did you always tell me not to write rent in the memo line?" Mom's eyes narrowed. "What?" "When I first started paying, I wrote rent once. You called me immediately and told me to use the wording you gave me." Dad set his tablet down. "For accounting reasons." "What accounting reasons?" "Sissy," Mom said, in that soft warning voice she used when I was a teenager, "do not start acting suspicious with your own parents." I looked from her to Dad. Neither of them asked what I had found. That told me something. After breakfast, I went back downstairs and started searching through old emails. I typed rent, basement, payment, accounting. My stomach turned when one email from 8 years ago appeared with the subject line, basement arrangement. It was from Mom. The message was short. Starting next month, use the memo exactly as discussed. Don't write rent, it complicates accounting. I read it 3 times. Then I searched trust. Nothing. I searched Grandma's name. That was when I thought of my cousin Talia. Talia was older than me, organized in a way that made everyone trust her with paperwork, appointments, funeral programs, medical folders. When Grandma was sick, Talia had helped her keep track of insurance forms and bills. If anyone knew whether Grandma had a trust, it would be her. I called her from my bed, keeping my voice low. She picked up on the 4th ring. Hey Sisi, everything okay? I looked at the basement ceiling, at the floorboards above me, where my parents were walking around in the house I had been paying for. Did Grandma ever have a trust? I asked. The line went quiet. Not confused quiet. Careful quiet. Talia. She exhaled. Why are you asking? Because one of my old payments to Mom and Dad says trust transfer reimbursement. Another pause. Then Talia said, Sissy, I remember Grandma saying she wanted you to have help with your first home. She said you were the only one who sat with her during chemo without being asked. My hand tightened around the phone. Help hows? I don't know the details, I was never in charge of it, but there were papers, I remember papers from an attorney. Before I could ask another question, the floor above me creaked. Then came footsteps on the basement stairs. Slow. Deliberate. Talia said, Sissy, are you there? My doorknob turned. Mom knocked once, then opened the door without waiting. She stood there in her robe, holding a printed copy of my bank statement. Mom stood in my basement doorway, with my bank statement pinched between her fingers like evidence against me. The page shook a little, but her voice didn't. Why are you digging through family business? Talia was still on the phone. I didn't hang up. I lowered it to my lap and stared at the paper in Mom's hand. Why were you in my room? I asked. Her mouth tightened. Don't change the subject. That is the subject. You came into my room, went through my things and printed my bank records. I saw your laptop open. So you used it. She stepped farther inside. You're acting sneaky. I stood up from the bed. No, I'm acting like someone who has paid you $2,400 a month for 8 years and just found out the mortgage may not even exist. Mom's eyes flicked toward the ceiling. A second later, Dad's footsteps came down the stairs. He didn't ask what happened. He already knew. He came to the doorway and stood behind Mom, blocking the narrow hall. What did you say to your mother? He asked. I asked why my first payment says trust transfer reimbursement. Mom folded the bank statement in half. You're planning to embarrass us. I'm asking a question. Dad pointed toward the room around me. You want to act like a hostile tenant? Fine, we can give you 30 days notice. That landed. For years they had told me this basement was family. The second I asked for records, it became leverage. I looked at Mom's hand, then lifted my phone and took a photo of the statement she was holding. Her face changed. What are you doing? Keeping my own records. Dad stepped forward. Don't get clever. I moved around them with my work bag and car keys. Mom said my name twice as I passed, each time sharper than the last, but I didn't stop. Upstairs the house looked normal. Framed family photos, lemon candle on the entry table, a house built to make people think we were close. Outside, I got into my car and realized Talia was still on the line. She whispered, Sissy, what did I just hear? I swallowed. I think they're scared. That weekend was Aunt Renee's barbecue. I almost didn't go, but Mom texted me that morning. Don't make this worse, be normal. So I went. The backyard was full of folding chairs, paper plates, cousins balancing drinks, and Dad standing by the grill like a man with nothing to hide. For the first 20 minutes, no one mentioned the house. Then Mom raised her voice just enough for the nearest table to hear. Sissy has been very emotional lately, she said, smiling at Aunt Renee. Apparently discounted rent is oppression now. Dad laughed. She thinks adulthood should come with a family coupon. A few people chuckled because they thought they understood the joke. I stood beside the cooler with a paper cup in my hand, watching them build the story before I could speak. Ungrateful daughter, generous parents, basement charity case. Aunt Renee looked at me. Discounted rent, how much are you paying? Mom's head turned fast. Renee, it's private. I said $2,400 a month. The yard went quiet in pieces. First the cousins by the grill stopped talking, then Aunt Renee's fork paused over her plate, then someone near the patio door said, "Wait for the basement." My cousin Andre frowned. "That's more than my mortgage." Another cousin asked, "Does it have a full kitchen?" "No," I said. "Separate mailbox?" "No. Separate entrance. The side door goes to the stairs. It's not a separate unit." Mom's smile stayed on, but it looked painful now. Dad flipped a burger that didn't need flipping. "She's making it sound worse than it is." Aunt Renee's eyes narrowed. "Mara, you told me she paid $600. My skin went cold for the second time that week. I turned to Mom. "You told people I paid $600. Mom set her plate down. "I said we helped you." "No," Aunt Renee said. "You said she was barely contributing so she could save." There it was, in front of everyone. They hadn't just taken the money, they had hidden it by making me look dependent. Dad shut the grill lid too hard. This is exactly why family money should stay private. From the other side of the fence, Mr. Alvarez appeared with pruning shears in one hand. He smiled awkwardly, clearly catching only the last line. "Everything all right?" Dad's jaw tightened. "Fine." Mr. Alvarez looked at him and gave a small laugh. "Well, I still remember that party you threw after paying off the house. You were happier than when the kids graduated." Nobody moved. Aunt Renee slowly turned toward my father. "Paid off?" she asked. Dad's face flushed. "Alvarez, mind your own business." Mr. Alvarez looked from him to me and his smile disappeared. I thought everybody knew. The silence pressed down over the yard. Mom whispered, "Dennis." But it was too late. Aunt Renee stepped closer to me, her voice low enough that it felt worse than yelling. "Sissy," she said, "did your mother ever give you the papers from your grandmother's attorney?" I left the barbecue before dessert. No goodbye, no explanation, just my keys in my hand and Aunt Renee's question following me all the way to the car. "Did your mother ever give you the papers from your grandmother's attorney?" My hands shook so badly, I had to sit in the driver's seat for a minute before starting the engine. "Papers as attorney, trust, reimbursement, 8 years of transfers." Every piece was starting to lean toward the same ugly shape, but I still didn't have proof. And that was the part my parents had always counted on. They knew I could be hurt, they knew I could be guilted, they knew I could be embarrassed into silence. But proof was different. On Monday, I took my lunch break early and drove to the county records office. The woman behind the counter asked for the property address. I gave it to her from memory because it was the address on every form, every school record, every license, every account I had ever opened. She typed for a moment, then printed a document and slid it across the counter. "Lien release," she said. "Mortgage was satisfied 7 years ago." I stared at the date. 7 years. Not recently, not last year, not during some temporary hardship they forgot to explain. 7 years ago, my parents had celebrated paying off the house while still charging me $2,400 a month to live under it. I folded the paper carefully and put it into a folder I had bought on the way there. After work, I called the estate attorney Aunt Renee had named. The receptionist sounded polite and distant until I gave my full name. Then her tone changed. "Can you spell your middle name for verification?" I did. "1 moment, please." The hold music played for less than 30 seconds before she came back. "Ms. Sisi, the attorney would like to meet with you. Are you available tomorrow morning?" My chest tightened. Is something wrong? I'm not allowed to discuss the file by phone. The file, I repeated. Yes, she said carefully, your grandmother's file. The next morning, I sat across from an attorney named Mr. Feld, a thin man with silver glasses and a desk stacked with old folders. He didn't waste time pretending this was casual. He opened a scanned document on his monitor and turned it slightly toward me. Your grandmother established a modest education and housing trust with you named as beneficiary, he said. I looked at the screen, but the words seemed to move. Beneficiary, I said. Yes. The funds were intended to support either further education or a first home purchase. Not enough to buy a property outright, but enough to make a meaningful down payment. I pressed my fingers into my knees under the desk. Why didn't I know about it? He paused. When the trust was created, you were younger. Your parents were listed as temporary custodians. The paperwork required control and disclosure to shift to you when you turned 21. I'm 29. I understand. The room became very quiet. He clicked to another page. I'll need to pull archived records to see exactly what was transferred, when, and under what authorization. I can't make conclusions today. Then he pointed to a phrase in an old letter. Trust transfer reimbursement. The same words from my bank record. I leaned forward. That's what my first payment to my parents said. Mr. Feld looked at me over his glasses. You have that bank record. I have all of them. All 8 years. Yes. He sat back slowly. Then those records may matter. That was the first time someone outside my family said it like the situation was real. Not drama, not disrespect, not me being ungrateful. Records. I asked for copies of everything he could legally give me. He made a note, then said, do not confront them in person with incomplete information. Put communication in writing. By the time I got home, the side entrance felt different. The basement door had a sheet of paper taped to it. For a moment, I thought it might be a lease notice. It wasn't formal, it wasn't filed, it wasn't even written professionally. It said, vacate within 30 days due to disrespect, hostility and non-payment. Non-payment. I stood there staring at the word. I had never missed a transfer, not when my hours were cut, not when my car needed repairs, not when I skipped vacations, furniture, dinners out, and every chance to build a life that didn't start at the bottom of their stairs. I took a photo of the notice. Then I went inside, sat at my desk, opened my banking app and cancelled the next scheduled payment. For the first time in 8 years, the automatic transfer disappeared from the calendar. My thumb hovered over the screen after it was done, expecting panic to hit. Instead, the room felt sharper. I opened my email and wrote one message. Mom, Dad. I am requesting a full written accounting of all payments I have made related to rent, the house, and any funds connected to Grandma's trust. Going forward, all communication about this needs to be in writing. I copied Mr. Feld. Then I attached the lien release, the photo of the notice, and the oldest bank record. I hit send. For 3 minutes, nothing happened. Then my phone rang. Dad. I watched his name flash across the screen until it stopped. Then it rang again. Mom. I let that one stop too. A voicemail notification appeared. I pressed play and held the phone away from my ear like it might burn me. Dad's voice came through first, low and furious. Delete that email right now, or you'll destroy this family. I sat in Mr. Feld's office the next morning while Dad's voicemail played from my phone. Delete that email right now, or you'll destroy this family. In the background, Mom whispered, Dennis, stop talking. But he kept going. You have no idea what you're opening. After everything we did for you, this is how you repay us. Mr. Feld stopped the recording and looked at me. That, he said, is useful. I didn't smile. I just reached into my bag and placed my bank statements on his desk in a neat stack. 8 years of transfers, every month, every $2,400 payment, every memo line they had controlled. My hands didn't shake this time. The archived records came back 2 weeks later, and the truth was worse than a paid-off mortgage. Grandma had left money in a trust to help me buy my first home. It wasn't enough to buy a house outright, but it was enough for a real down payment. When I turned 21, Mom and Dad were supposed to disclose it and transfer control. They never did. Instead, they used the trust to create the first payment arrangement. They claimed they had advanced money for my benefit and that my monthly payments were reimbursement connected to the trust. That was why the oldest bank record didn't say rent, it said trust transfer reimbursement. But there had been no real rent debt, there had been no mortgage emergency, and after the house was paid off, they kept charging me anyway. For 8 years, they told me I was helping keep the family home stable. For 8 years, they told relatives I barely paid anything. The one bank record proved the lie started at the beginning. Mr. Feld sent a formal demand letter. At first, Mom denied everything, then she called it a misunderstanding, then she texted, "You're breaking my heart." I replied, "Send the accounting." After the barbecue, the family didn't believe their version anymore. Aunt Renee stopped inviting Mom to Sunday dinners. My cousins apologized for laughing at the discounted rent jokes. Mr. Alvarez signed a statement confirming the house had been paid off 7 years earlier. Even my younger brother asked Dad why they told everyone I was living off them. The settlement didn't return every dollar of the $230,000 because I had lived there. But the trust funds, and a significant portion of the improperly represented money, came back to me. Mom and Dad had to cancel their kitchen renovation. Then they took out a loan against the same paid-off house they had used to control me. I moved out on a Saturday morning. Mom stood at the top of the basement stairs, arms crossed. Dad wouldn't look at me. I carried the last box past them without asking permission. My new condo was small, 1 bedroom, morning light through cheap blinds, a kitchen with mismatched mugs, a front door no one opened without knocking. On the first morning there, I made coffee and scheduled my first mortgage payment from an account only I controlled. Then Mom texted, "Was it worth losing your family over money?" I looked around the quiet room. It was never about the money. It was about finally knowing which door was mine to close.